There are many other natural and spontaneous kinds of comprehension that can also result from the waking and sleeping rhythms that I have suggested. The unconscious, the color black, and death all have strongly negative connotations in which the inner self is feared. The dream state is mistrusted and often suggests thoughts of both death and or evil. But changed wake-sleep habits can, again, bring about a transformation in which it is obvious that dreams contain great wisdom and creativity, and the unconscious is indeed quite conscious, and that in fact the individual sense of identity can be retained in the dream state. The fear of self-annihilation, symbolically thought of as death, can then no longer apply as it did before. As a result, other individually built-up beliefs that depended upon the existence of such opposites also spontaneously break down. When you find yourself as alert, responsive, and intellectual in the dream state as you are in waking life, it becomes impossible to operate within the old framework. This does not mean that in all dreams that particular kind of awareness is achieved, but it is often accomplished within the suggested wake-sleep patterns. A certain beneficial and natural situation is arrived at, in which the conscious and unconscious minds meet. This occurs spontaneously, whatever your sleep patterns, but it is very brief and seldom remembered. The optimum state is so short because of the prolonged drugging of the conscious mind. Animals follow their own natural waking-sleeping schedules, and in their way derive far greater benefits from both states than you, and use them with greater effectiveness, particularly along the lines of the body's built-in system of therapy. They know exactly when to alter their patterns to longer or shorter sleep periods, therefore adjusting the adrenaline output and regulating all of the bodily hormones. In humans, the idea of nutrition is also involved. With your habits, the body is literally starved for long periods at night, then often overfed during the day. Important therapeutic information that is given in dreams and meant to be recalled is not remembered because your sleep habits plunge you into what you think of as unconsciousness far too long. The body itself can be physically refreshed and rested in much less than 8 hours, and after 5 hours, the muscles themselves yearn for activity. This need is also a signal to awaken, so that unconscious material and dream information can be consciously assimilated. Many of your misconceptions about the nature of reality are directly related to the division you place between your sleeping and waking experience, your conscious and unconscious activity. Opposites seem to occur that do not exist in actuality. Myths, symbols, and rationalizations all become necessary to explain the seeming divergences, the seeming contradictions between realities that appear to be so different. Individual psychological mechanisms are activated sometimes in terms of neuroses or other mental problems. These bring out into the open inner challenges or dilemmas that otherwise would be worked out more easily through an open give and take of conscious and unconscious reality. In the natural body-mind relationship, the sleep state operates as a great connector and interpreter, allowing the free flow of conscious and unconscious material. In the kind of sleep patterns suggested, optimum conditions are set up. Neurosis and psychosis simply would not occur under such conditions. And in the natural back-and-forth leeway of the system, exterior dilemmas or problems are worked out in the dream situation, and interior difficulty may be solved symbolically through physical experience. Illumination concerning the inner self may appear clearly during waking reality, and in the same way, invaluable information about the conscious self may be received in the dream state. There is a spontaneous flow of psychic energy with appropriate hormonal reaction in both situations. You do not have energy dammed up through repressions, for example, and emotions and their expression are not feared. In your present system of beliefs, and with the dubious light in which the unconscious is considered, a fear of the emotions is often generated. Not only are they often hindered in waking life then, but censored as much as possible in dreams. Their expression becomes very difficult. Great blockages of energy occur, which in your terms can result in neurotic or even stronger psychotic behavior. The inhibition of such emotions also interferes with the nervous system and its therapeutic devices. These repressed emotions and the whole charge behind such distorted concepts about the unconscious result in a projection outward upon others. In your individual area, there will be persons upon whom you will project all of those charged, frightening emotions or characteristics. At the same time, you will be drawn to those individuals because the projections represent a part of you. On a national basis, the characteristics or qualities will be projected outward onto an enemy. Within a nation, they can be directed against those of a particular race, creed, or color. You did not simply come upon your sleep patterns. They are not the result of your technology or industrial habits. Instead, they are a part of those beliefs that caused you to develop your technological industrial society. They emerged as you began to categorize experience more and more, to see yourselves as separate from the spring or fountainhead of your own psychological reality. In natural circumstances, the animals, while sleeping at night, are still partially alert against predators and danger. There is within the innate characteristics of the mammalian brain, then, a great balance in which complete physical relaxation can occur in sleep, while consciousness is maintained in a quote-unquote partially suspended, passive yet alert manner. That state allows conscious participation and interpretation of quote-unquote unconscious dream activity. The condition gives the body its refreshment, yet it does not lie inert for such long periods of time. Mammals have also changed their habits to accommodate those conditions that you have thrust upon them, so the behavior studied in laboratories is not necessarily that shown by the same animals in their natural state. Taken alone, this statement can appear deceptive. The alterations in behavior are themselves natural, of course. Animal consciousness is different than your own. With yours, a finer discrimination is necessary so that unconscious material can be assimilated. All of mankind's developments, however, are latent in the animal brain, and many attributes of which you are unaware are latent in your own. The biological pathways for them already exist. In your current beliefs, again, consciousness is equated in very limited terms with your conception of intellectual behavior. You consider this to be a peak of mental achievement, growing from the quote-unquote undifferentiated perceptions of childhood, and returning ignominiously to them again in old age. Such wake-sleep patterns, as I have suggested, would acquaint you with the great creative and energetic portions of psychological behavior that are not undifferentiated at all, but simply distinct from your usual concepts of consciousness, and these operate throughout your life. The natural experiences of what you think of as time distortion, for example, occurring in childhood and old age alike, represent quite normal experiences of your basic quote-unquote time environment, much more so than the clock time with which you are so familiar. The patterns I have suggested, therefore, will bring you far closer to an understanding of the reality of your being and help you break down beliefs that cause personal and social division. Now, the long period of continuous waking conscious activity is to some extent at variance with your natural inclinations. It cuts you off from the spontaneous give and take of conscious and unconscious material mentioned earlier, and of itself, you see, necessitates certain changes that then make your prolonged sleep period necessary. The body is denied the frequent rests it requires. Conscious stimuli is overapplied, making assimilation difficult and placing a strain upon the mind-body relationship. The division between the two aspects of experience begins to take on the characteristics of completely diverse behavior. The unconscious becomes more and more unfamiliar to consciousness. Those beliefs build up about it, and the symbolisms involved are exaggerated. The unknown seems to be threatening and degenerate. The color black assumes stronger tendencies in its connection with evil, something to be avoided. Self-annihilation seems to be a threat ever present in the dream or sleep state. At the same time, all of those flamboyant, creative, spontaneous, emotional surges that emerge normally from the unconscious become feared and projected outward then upon enemies, other races, and creeds. Sexual behavior obviously will be considered depraved by those most afraid of their own sensual natures. They will ascribe it to primitive or evil or unconscious sources, and even attempt to censor their dreams in that regard. They will then project the greatest sexual license upon those groups they choose to represent their own repressed behavior. If sex is equated with evil, the other group will of course be considered evil. If the members of such a rigid group believe that youth is innocent, then they will deny sexual experience as having any place in childhood, and alter their own memories to fit their beliefs. If a young adult believes that sex is good but old age is bad, then he or she will find it impossible to consider exuberant sexuality as a portion of an older person's experience. In the dream state, the child and the old man or woman can exist simultaneously, and the individual is made quite aware of the full range of creaturehood. The wisdom of the child and the aged are both available. Lessons from quote-unquote future experience are also at hand. There are quite natural physical mechanisms in the body that provide for such interaction. You deny yourself many of these advantages, however, through the artificial alienation that you have set up by your present wake-sleep patterns, to which, again, your ideas of good and evil are intimately connected. Those of you who cannot practically make any alterations in sleeping habits can still obtain some benefits by changing your beliefs in the areas discussed, learning to recall your dreams, and resting briefly when you can, and immediately afterward recording those impressions that you retain. You must give up any ideas that you have as to the unsavory nature of unconscious activity. You must learn to believe in the goodness of your being. Otherwise, you will not explore these other states of your own reality. When you trust yourself, then you will trust your own dream interpretations, and these will lead you to greater self-understanding. Your beliefs of good and evil will become much more clear to you, and you will no longer need to project repressed tendencies out upon others in exaggerated fashion. Your attitudes towards sleep, dreams, or any alterations of consciousness are all colored to some extent then by beliefs concerning good and evil in your Western society. These emerge from the old Puritan work ethic. Quote-unquote, the devil finds evil work for idle hands. This kind of thinking by itself brings about an overall attitude in which rest is frowned upon and dreams are considered suspect. Daydreaming and even mild alterations of consciousness take on moral connotations. Such ideas are mirrored in your society in innumerable fashions, and in areas in which values of good and evil are not apparent. Active sports are considered good, however, but often contrasted to passive intuitive activities which are often then seen as bad. You insist upon a material product of some physically demonstrated kind. In that context, dreams or daydreams are not viewed as constructive or productive. Young people are urged to tackle life aggressively, but in the usage of the term, this means competitively. It also implies, and of course promotes, the direction of individual consciousness in an exterior fashion only. Not only is consciousness to be focused to the external reality, but within those limits it is still further harnessed towards certain specific goals. Other inclinations are frowned upon. Such individuals are trained to consider any alterations of consciousness, any seemingly quote-unquote passive endeavor, as dangerous to one degree or another. An artist will be tolerated only if his work sells well, for example, in which case it will be thought that the artist is simply trickier than most in discovering a way to make money. The writer is put up with if books result in either fame or fortune. The poet is scarcely tolerated, for usually his or her gifts bring neither. The dreamer, whatever his age, job, or family background, is considered most suspect, for it seems that he doesn't even have a craft to excuse his moral laziness. People with such beliefs will find it most difficult to understand the creativity of their own being. The work done in dreams, the multitudinous experience encountered there, will be invisible to them. They will have little regard or respect for the dreamers or visionaries of the world, and will be the first to leap upon those in their own generation who display such tendencies. For all of this, however, inner portions of each individual's being are not touched by those beliefs. The ideas will be reflected in their daily experience, certainly, and seem to be justified. Yet beneath, the inner self is quite aware of the great thrusting creativity that occurs in dreams, and realizes that the source of individual energy has nothing to do with such superficial concepts as the nature of good and evil. End of chapter.